My name is Lewis Potter, but most people call me Lou. I'm married to Ruby, and we've been together for 4 years without kids. We're not in a rush to change that since we both value our freedom. Maybe we'll think about it more seriously when we're older. We both grew up in modest backgrounds just a few streets apart, but we didn't meet until we were 18 at a recruitment event organized by our school. Ruby had excelled academically and had a qualification in bookkeeping and credit control. On the other hand, I hadn't done well in school but had a strong work ethic and a knack for business. I started working odd jobs cleaning shops and small offices when I was 15, and by 18, I had my own cleaning business with 30 employees and contracts with big businesses in town. Ruby was looking for a job, and I was looking to hire. When Ruby approached my table at the event, we hit it off. She handed me her CV and flirtatiously hinted that she wasn't interested in cleaning jobs, but maybe I'd be interested in something else. I called her before she even reached the next table and asked her out to dinner for the following night. We got married 4 years later. Ruby found a job at the event, starting in the purchasing department of an engineering firm and eventually working her way up to manager of purchasing and credit control after 8 years. With our combined success, we enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle without children. My cleaning business was doing well, and I had become the biggest office and shop cleaning company in town after acquiring 2 competitors. Cleaning staff and security personnel are often the first to notice anything unusual, so I'm always in the loop. About 4 months ago, a private investigator named Ross Evans showed up at my office. He was working for a client who suspected their wife of having an affair. The wife worked as a purchase ledger clerk at Stevens Piping, and the suspect was Alistair Clark, a salesman at AM Metals known for pursuing married women. Ross needed more information to confirm the affair, and he wanted my help. I found myself drawn into this clandestine operation, though the idea of playing secret squirrel was a bit amusing. However, the mention of AM Metals caught my attention. Ruby's workplace also dealt with them for raw materials, and this Alistair Clark character sounded like trouble I didn't want her near. I glanced at Ross, who was clearly anticipating my next move, so I asked, "I get the idea, but how can I assist?" He grinned. "I was hoping you'd ask that. It's straightforward. Clark leaves flowers, notes, and other items on her desk. She reads them and tosses them in the bin. Your staff then empty the bin. They can retrieve anything personal from him and provide it to us. Our legal team confirms it's legally sound for you to assist in this way. We've also secured authorization from her employer," he continued, handing me a document. "By helping with our inquiry, they avoid legal trouble related to violating the fraternization clause in her contract. If you need confirmation, here's the CEO's contact information." I already had the CEO's number. Without a word to Ross, I called him. He picked up on the second ring and immediately confirmed permission for us to retrieve and share relevant information. He mentioned a forthcoming email from his attorney for formal documentation. Clearly, they wanted this resolved swiftly. Ross grinned as I ended the call. I nodded, saying, "He confirmed your instructions. Provide me with the details, and we'll separate her bin for collection at 11 each morning. I'll sort through it, and you can collect the relevant items." Ross agreed, and I briefed our team supervisor, Donna, on what to look for: early lunches, late lunches, flowers, notes, and so forth. We collaborated with Ross for about 6 weeks. Eventually, he informed us that the investigation had concluded. One day, Ruby came home looking flustered, but she refused to elaborate. A week later, Donna visited my office looking troubled. As she settled into a chair, I sensed something serious was on her mind. Then she began, "A couple of months ago, I was monitoring that woman in the office." I couldn't forget the past events that Donna had just brought up. Yes, it was quite an interesting time. "Why do you mention it?" I inquired, my curiosity piqued as I raised an eyebrow. She hesitated a bit before responding, "Well, as you know, I'm now working in the same office as your wife, and that same man we were keeping an eye on is now visiting her. I saw a large bouquet of flowers, and she went out to lunch with him. Here's the card that came with the flowers." Taking the card, I read it silently. "My dearest Ruby, thank you for assisting in renewing the contract with your company. Your help means the world to me. I'd love for us to have lunch and connect properly. With love, Alistair. My heart sank. The words on the card indicated more than just a professional relationship, and it seemed like things were crossing a line. I recalled Ross's warnings about this man's tactics with married women, and now it seemed my wife was his target. After thanking Donna, I asked her to keep me informed and bring any further notes to me. Once she left, I immediately called Ross, who picked up on the third ring. "Hi Lou, what's up?" he greeted me. I didn't waste time relaying Donna's report. "One of my employees who previously worked on that case with you just informed me that the same Mr. Clark is making advances toward my wife. She's going out to lunch with him, and I have the card from the flowers he sent, which suggests his intentions." Ross took a moment to absorb the information. "We're still investigating Clark. You're now the third husband in this situation. The others didn't initially know him. They've agreed to split costs. Would you like to join them?" "Absolutely. What do I need to do?" I responded. Ross arranged a meeting for us at 2 o'clock. I arrived punctually at his office, where I met Dan McWilliams and Johnny Ashley, the other husbands, along with Ross and his colleague Mike Pearson, who handled data collection for the case. Ross initiated the meeting, explaining, "Gentlemen, we're here because you all share the same predicament. Dan and Johnny, this is Lou. He's interested in joining your investigation. If you're agreeable, we'll sign him up as a client and handle the necessary paperwork for information sharing." Both Dan and Johnny nodded in agreement as Ross explained the situation. "Well, Dan, Johnny, and Lou, our common issue revolves around Mr. Alistair Clark," Ross began. "For your understanding, Lou, Dan's wife works at AM Metals with Mr. Clark, while Johnny's wife is employed by the school board, which procures metals for technology classes. Mr. Clark follows a well-practiced pattern. He pursues women at their workplaces, sending flowers, messages, inviting them to lunch, and often attempting to arrange motel meetings in the afternoon. With married women, he typically targets those with children, pressuring them to engage in extramarital affairs. For those without children, he encourages them to request hall passes from their husbands, deriving satisfaction from knowing he has compromised their marriages. He often persuades them to go away for weekends before ultimately abandoning them. We've documented at least 5 divorces attributable to him in the past year alone. His misconduct dates back to his previous employment in Dallas, where he was dismissed due to multiple lawsuits from husbands accusing him of alienating their wives' affections." Taking another sip of coffee, Ross continued, "Lou, do you provide cleaning services for either AM Metals or the school district offices? Typically, we can access discarded materials from bins unless there's a confidentiality agreement." I shook my head. "No, we don't service either of those locations," I replied. Ross nodded in understanding. "That's unfortunate. However, continue collecting rubbish from your wife's bin. Now, who covers the expenses for your wife's phone?" "It's my business," I answered. Ross smiled and inquired about the type of phone she had. After learning it was a Samsung, he handed me a document granting permission to access her phone data. He provided instructions for installing software via a QR code, allowing us to monitor her calls, texts, emails, and WhatsApp messages. Wrapping up the meeting, we exchanged contact information and set up a WhatsApp group for quick communication. Upon returning home, I noticed Ruby seemed preoccupied, clutching her phone tightly and appearing distracted. She stepped outside to feed the dog, taking her phone along, a behavior out of the ordinary for her. When I inquired about Ruby's unusual behavior, she attributed it to having a rough day and feeling exceptionally fatigued. Oddly, she retired to bed at 9:30, much earlier than her usual bedtime. I stayed up until our regular hour before deciding to search for her phone. It wasn't in its usual spot, so I headed upstairs to our bedroom. Spotting her phone cable beside the bed, I noticed it disappeared under her pillow. Retrieving it without disturbing her proved impossible, so I reluctantly retired for the night, my mind racing with worry. Luck was on my side when she rose in the middle of the night and left the room. Seizing the opportunity, I swiftly retrieved her phone, scanned the QR code, entered the necessary details, and discreetly returned it before her return. The following morning, she seemed distant, quietly going about her morning routine until departing for work without much interaction. Around 11:30, I received a call from Mike, Ross's colleague, informing me of the initial data analysis results. He explained, she's opened a new email address primarily used by him. This gives us a valuable lead for hacking into his email. His messages are persuasive, emphasizing the need for new experiences to invigorate your marriage. He's extracting intimate details about your relationship and exploiting them to his advantage. He's already hinted at spicing things up with a weekend away, dismissing it as just sex and suggesting that confessing to you wouldn't constitute cheating, hence, you couldn't refuse a hall pass. I recounted her behavior from the previous night and morning, expressing my concern. She seemed consumed by something last night and this morning. She wasn't even aware of my presence, I remarked. Are they still messaging or planning a lunch? Mike reviewed the latest message. They're planning lunch tomorrow at the beach club to discuss further. She's already agreed, he informed me. Upon concluding the call with Mike, I pondered my next steps. Confronting her directly seemed futile. He'd continue his advances, potentially luring her to a motel. No, I needed to put an end to this, even if it meant considering divorce. I reached out to Ross, explaining the situation. He's targeting Ruby blatantly, flaunting it in my face. Even if I confront her, he'll persist, possibly escalating to a motel rendezvous. I need a decisive plan to stop this in its tracks. I'm contemplating divorce proceedings and exploring a plan B. What's your take? After a moment of silence, Ross responded, having a backup plan is wise. But if he's as relentless as I suspect, divorce might become inevitable. I'll prepare a package for your attorney or recommend one if needed. I have one, thanks. He did the business agreement and it is protected in a divorce behind a trust, I replied. I phoned my attorney and asked for an appointment. We agreed to meet the next day at 9:30 in the morning. As I walked into the attorney's office, he looked at me. Crap, who's cheated? I smiled. He could read me like a book. I sat down and took the cup of coffee his secretary placed in front of me and started. Ruby is about to cheat on me. There is a salesman coming into her work, and he is putting the moves on her. She's buying it, and right now I don't see any other outcome. I am working on a plan B to stop it, but plan A is divorce if she cheats. We spent the next hour discussing the options. I wanted a straight-out divorce. The business was protected behind an agreement, but everything else was 50-50. There were no children, so there was no need for support. The house would be sold. I was not going to sue Clark, his employer, or her employer too costly and no prospects of success. We shook hands, I paid a retainer and left. He would complete the papers and hold them on file for me to call on, if needed. The week progressed and Ruby's mood was up and down. One night, she couldn't get enough of my time and affection. The next, she hardly even knew I was there. On Friday afternoon, Donna called to say Ruby had received a big bunch of flowers. The message on the card was, I have taken the plunge, will you? As I put the message on the WhatsApp group, I noticed Ross had put up a message, saying, Dan, he has taken her to the Holiday Inn for lunch. We know he has a room, but it's not a done deal. Get here now and we might get this stopped. I was glad for Dan. He would get closure now, one way or the other. I hoped it was getting close to that point for me. I was so distracted that I was letting new business slip through my fingers. I messaged the group telling Mike about the flowers and what was on the card. His response was, I will check her emails now, there was nothing this morning. About 5 minutes later, Mike phoned, and he said, look at your WhatsApp without hanging up. I opened the app and there was a document sent to me by Mike. I opened it. It was a booking confirmation for a hotel located on a lake about 30 miles out of town. It was for a double room for next Friday and Saturday nights, and the two names on the book were Clark and Ruby. I went back on the phone and said, that looks bad. Mike sighed. Yes, and the email is worse. It is a cheater's handbook guiding Ruby how to tell you and what to say. I am going to send it to you. I thanked him and we hung up. The email arrived and I read it through. It was a chain of emails with the subject weekend. It started about 2 weeks ago, with him sending her a link to a hotel. It was the same hotel he finally booked. In the mail, he said how he would love to take her to the hotel to pamper her, making suggestions of other things he would like to do. The next mails were a line of him asking her what she thought and why would I not let her do something that would make her happy. The final email was the booking, plus a list of things to say and do to get me to say yes. It was the pre-cheating handbook. It included making me a nice meal next Thursday, loads of sex all week, then telling me it was just sex with him, but it would teach her so much that I had so many more experiences before we got married, ending with "if you really loved me." Her response was noncommittal, but left her options open with, "I'm not sure Lou will buy that. Let me think about it." The weekend was hard work. I could not say anything about what I knew, but she was over the top nice. We had sex Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday night. On Sunday, she took me to bed in the middle of the afternoon, again on Sunday night, and a quickie Monday morning. Monday at 3, Ross phoned and updated me on the latest email. Bad news. She just emailed Clark and said she would suggest it to you on Thursday night. If you said no, she would not do it. If you said yes, she would. He came back to her and said, remember, if he gets antsy, that forgiveness is easier to ask for than permission. I thanked Ross and asked him to prepare a file of everything we had. I asked if they had any photos of the two of them being intimate. I heard papers rustling and he came back saying, we have a photo of them kissing. Not a passionate kiss, but a kiss nonetheless. I said, good. Will you put everything into a folder and have that photo as the cover page on the outside? Also, send the full folder to my attorney. He confirmed he would. My next call was to my attorney. I gave him a heads up and advised him that the folder would be with him later. We agreed she would be served in the hotel on Saturday morning during breakfast. Nothing like a divorce petition to give her indigestion. On Monday night, she was looking for sex, but I begged off saying I had a big proposal to complete. I sat in the office and did some work. I didn't go to bed until 2 in the morning. She was sound asleep. I only slept fitfully and was up for 6 a.m. and off to work before she could attack me. The folder was delivered by courier. I sat in the office and read it. You could see the seduction technique. It was unsettling, but it was clearly effective. Ross had included details, but no names, of at least 7 marriages he had destroyed in the last 18 months. In the folder, there was also a note from Dan. He had gone to the Holiday Inn and joined his wife and Clark at the table. His wife freaked out and ran out of the restaurant crying. Ross had to intervene to prevent Dan from attacking Clark, then took him home. Dan and his wife have started counseling to see if they can save their marriage, especially with 3 children under the age of 8. At the very least, a temporary fix would buy them some time, and his wife had left her job, effectively removing Clark from the picture. As I read through the contents, my secretary entered the room. She looked at me without saying a word. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face as I poured out the whole story to her. After I finished, she asked, "What are you going to do about it?" For the first time in a while, I smiled. She wasn't just my secretary, she was a friend offering her support. I also noticed something I hadn't seen before: she was actually quite attractive. Returning my smile, she said, "Plan A is divorce. If she leaves with him on Friday, she gets served on Saturday morning at the hotel. No second chances. But why not consider a plan B to make her stop? Why not have your own weekend away with someone else?" I couldn't help but smile back, asking, "And who would that someone else be?" I already knew her answer, but she replied confidently, "Me, of course. Your ever-faithful secretary has gotten under your skin, and you just need to get it out of your system. It would only be about sex and nothing to do with your marriage. You have the template in that email. Drop it on her before she drops it on you." It was brilliantly simple, and it would force Ruby to confront her own infidelity head-on. Tuesday night, I made love to my wife, devoid of any affection. It was difficult. Wednesday morning, neither of us felt like a quickie. Wednesday night was a bit less strained, but only marginally. Thursday morning, as I was leaving, Ruby woke up and shouted something about dinner, but I intentionally ignored it. Around midday on Thursday, Ross called to inform me that Ruby had emailed Clark, saying she was making me a big dinner and would let him know how the discussion went. I decided to preempt her, so I went to the store and bought chicken, potatoes, and veggies to roast, along with a bottle of her favorite white wine. By 2:30, I was home, with everything prepared and in the oven 2 hours later. Just as I was putting the potatoes into roast, Ruby came in carrying shopping bags. Confused, she asked, "What are you doing?" I flashed her a big smile. "Just preparing dinner for my lovely wife. I wanted to do something special, and then we need to talk." I could see a strange look on her face. Surprised, she replied, "Oh, I was going to make dinner. Can we talk after we finish, because I have something important I need to do, so it is going to be a long night." I replied, "Sure," but turned away with a smile on my face. I had already thrown a big wrench in her plans. Dinner felt strained. I led the conversation, steering it away every time she tried to broach the subject of talking to me directly. "Let's enjoy this lovely meal first, and then I'll share my big news," I interjected each time. Once we finished, I initiated the conversation. "Bring your wine into the kitchen, and we can talk," I instructed. Ruby followed me in. Earlier, I had placed the folder containing the email with her list of excuses on the kitchen table, concealed by a couple of magazines. Now, I removed the magazines, revealing only the typed-up document. "Ruby, you know I love you, and I would never intentionally hurt you. But we married young, and I lack experience. My new secretary, Miss Atwood, or Katie, as she prefers, has been sharing so many stories with me. I feel like I need to explore and learn before we settle down for good. So, I've booked a weekend away with her. It's just about sex and personal exploration, nothing to do with my feelings for you or our marriage. I'm telling you now so it's not considered cheating. I know you love me enough to understand," I explained. Ruby's face flushed red, and she erupted, "Over my dead body. And I want that woman fired on Monday, or it's over between us." Her reaction broke the tension, and I burst into laughter. "Your reaction is priceless. This couldn't have gone better," I exclaimed. In that moment, realization dawned on her. Everything I had just said mirrored what she was about to tell me. I closed the folder and handed it to her, revealing the image of her kissing Clark on the cover. Her face drained of color as she whispered, "You knew, and you played me." I nodded calmly. "Yes, I did. Your reaction is exactly what mine would have been if you had blindsided me. Unlike your situation, there's no hotel booking for me, and Miss Atwood and I have never crossed any lines. My story was purely fictional. Yours, however, is real," I clarified. As she flipped through the folder, shock registered on her face. Dates, times, photos of lunches and intimate encounters, copies of secret emails, transcripts of phone calls, it was all laid bare. "How could you invade my privacy like this?" she seethed. Remaining composed, I responded, "You started an emotional affair, planned to escalate it physically, humiliating me and jeopardizing our marriage. And yet, you're angry with me for trying to prevent it. I thought we could work through this, but maybe I was wrong," I lamented. "What do you mean, humiliating you and destroying our marriage?" "This was outside our marriage," she retorted, echoing the lines from the Cheater's Handbook. "Why would it affect us?" "Consider what you just said," I reminded her. "Your response to me was over my dead body. So why is it acceptable for you to cheat, but not for me?" She seemed about to retort, but I raised my hand and continued, "There are no hall passes. If you go with this Clark guy, it's cheating. Telling me beforehand doesn't change that." She glanced down, then stammered, "I can't process this right now. I need some time alone." With that, she hastily stood up and fled upstairs, taking the folder with her. I heard the click of the bedroom door locking behind her. As I tidied up the house, I remembered the tablet Ross had given me, granting access to Ruby's phone activity. I settled down and opened it, intrigued. Sure enough, there were emails between her and Clark. I delved into them. Her first message read, "Alistair, he knows. He had us followed and has copies of our messages. When I got home tonight, He had dinner ready and confronted me with exactly what I was planning to say. I couldn't bear the thought of him with another woman. Then he showed me the folder, containing everything, even the booking. What should I do? Clark's response came swiftly. Just tell him it's booked and that you need this. Stress your love for him and question if he loves you as much. He'll understand you need one weekend. Her next email revealed her hesitation. I tried, but he insists it would humiliate him and ruin our marriage. He says it's cheating no matter what. I can't go through with it. A weekend away might be fun, but I can't risk losing everything with Lou. Now Clark was becoming desperate. His next message attempted to sway her. Do you really think he'll divorce you? I doubt it. He won't find another woman like you. Pack your bag and bring it to work. Let's see how he reacts. If nothing happens, we'll go away, and you can beg his forgiveness on Sunday. I know your husband's type, and he won't want to lose you at any cost. Though it sounded like pure manipulation, she fell for it. Her final email in the chain read, "Okay. But if it looks like he'll leave me, I'm backing out. See you tomorrow." She seemed to be rationalizing everything, and Clark certainly knew how to smooth-talk her. I put the tablet away and settled down to watch TV, although my mind was racing. I had planned to serve divorce papers on Saturday, but perhaps I should move it up. However, once served, there would be no turning back. No, I needed to do something else tomorrow to show her I meant business. I called my attorney and briefed him. Hey, I just confronted her, and Clark has fed her a story about how I'll forgive her. She's planning to pack her bag and see how I react. I don't want to serve divorce papers until after they sleep together. But can we do something to show her we're serious? My attorney was quick on his feet. We can serve her with a pre-action letter. It would outline that we know about her weekend liaison plans and that if she proceeds, we'll serve her with divorce proceedings on Saturday morning at the hotel. I'll add some legal language, but we'll serve it to her in her office, preferably with Clark around. What do you think? That sounds perfect. It'll be clear proof of my intentions. She said Clark would pick her up at lunch, so let's aim for around 11 o'clock. Even if he's not there, her employer will catch on. He's traditional and won't tolerate this, especially a scene with a process server in the office. About an hour later, the attorney sent over a draft of the letter, tailored for the situation. It outlined what we knew and made it explicit she'd be served on Saturday morning. I confirmed my approval. I checked the tablet, but there were no further messages between Ruby and Clark, so I headed to bed. Surprisingly, the bedroom door wasn't locked. Inside, I found Ruby in bed, seemingly expecting romance. Her packed bag was by her side. I looked at her. I see you've made your decision. A quick encounter with Clark is more important than our marriage. With that, I turned and left for the guest room. I heard her call out, "Lou, wait. It's not like that. Come back, let me show you how I feel, how much your love means to me. Please." I didn't respond. I just collapsed on the bed, fully closed. The emails felt distant, but the sight of her packed bag, ready for another man, hit me hard. The emotional pain was real, and I cried most of the night, overwhelmed by grief and loss. The next morning, I could hear Ruby downstairs. I went to the bedroom for a shower and fresh clothes, noticing the bag was gone. Had she taken it downstairs or unpacked it? As I stepped out of the shower, the aroma of coffee and bacon filled the air. I figured the bag must be downstairs. Entering the kitchen, I saw her, biting her lip nervously. My first instinct was to hold back, but I couldn't. I assume this spread is your attempt to prove what a great wife you'd be after sleeping with another man. It won't work. If you go through with this, we're finished. I decided to lay it all out. Divorce papers will be served tomorrow at breakfast. No forgiveness. If you come home tonight, we'll start counseling to rebuild trust. If you go, don't bother returning. I turned to leave. Please stay for breakfast. We need to talk, she pleaded. Turning back, I replied, we already talked. Your packed bag says it all. I'm not having breakfast here. I need to learn to take care of myself. Assuming the bag was in her car, I left. Arriving at the office, Katie remarked, "You look terrible." I managed to smile. "You, on the other hand, look as stunning as ever." I don't know how it went. I told her about Plan B, she flipped, wanted you fired, and even said over my dead body. Then she went full on for herself. She took a bag this morning. Serving her with a letter at 11. Let's see if that wakes her up. Katie handed me coffee. I hope she comes to her senses. She can't think it's okay for her, but not for you. I offered a sad smile and sat down. This wasn't going to be a productive day. Just after 11, Ruby called. Through tears, she asked, "Are you serious about divorcing me?" She'd convinced herself I wouldn't. Without hesitation, if you cheat. We both know that's a deal breaker. Would you divorce me if I cheated? Her response was barely audible, but it was a definite yes. Clearing her throat, she added, "Will you come home now to talk?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I replied before ending the call. Arriving home first, I brewed some coffee, trying to dissipate the lingering scent of the bacon she'd cooked earlier. As she entered 10 minutes later, I began pouring coffee, gesturing to her seat. I initiated the conversation with a direct question. "Are you still planning to go to the hotel?" "How could you even ask that after you sent this?" "Of course I'm not going. I love you, I want to be with you. I know you'll never allow this, so it's off. Now, can we focus on fixing our marriage, or will I still be served?" she asked, sinking into her seat with her chin lowered. I reached across the table, gently lifting her chin to meet my gaze. "You'll only be served if you're at the hotel." "No hotel, no papers. But our marriage has been deeply wounded. Here's what needs to happen. First, you'll call Clark in front of me and end it. Then, deactivate and delete your private email with him. Next, inform your boss about Clark's behavior and request that he be barred from the office. Afterward, we'll book counseling to understand why this happened and how to rebuild trust." As I finished speaking, her phone rang. It was Clark. Putting it on speaker, she heard him demand, "Where are you, Ruby?" "I'm waiting for you in reception." Taking a deep breath, she replied firmly, "Alistair, I'm at home with Lou. He did something that made me reconsider, and if I go with you, my marriage will be over. I'm sorry, but you're not worth it. I won't be coming." His response was venomous, calling her names and cursing before hanging up. For the first time, Ruby saw him for who he truly was. Deactivating the email account proved challenging, but we managed it within the hour. Soon after, her boss and the HR manager arrived at our door. The HR manager, Mervyn Woods, addressed Ruby, expressing their disappointment but offering her a chance to explain. She dabbed her eyes and began recounting her interactions with Clark, detailing his inappropriate behavior and harassment over the past few months. I fell into his trap and started wearing more revealing outfits. He sent gifts, took me out for lunch, and gradually probed into my personal life, including my marriage and sex life. He belittled my husband, chipping away at my confidence little by little. Then he suggested a weekend getaway. Thankfully, Lou intervened with this letter-threatening divorce, which snapped me back to reality. I've informed Alistair that I won't be going, and Lou and I are committed to saving our marriage. I was actually planning to report this to you formally, so I'm relieved you're here." Woods glanced at the CEO, who nodded, before addressing Ruby, "We appreciate your honesty, Ruby. This was a serious misstep, and you're fortunate to retain your job. However, due to issues with the quality of AM Metals products, we're closing the account, effectively removing Mr. Clark from our premises. We won't pursue further action against you, but any repeat of this behavior will result in termination. Do you understand?" Ruby nodded meekly, replying, "Yes." With that, they bid farewell and left. Afterward, we had lunch and began searching for a counselor, which proved relatively easy. We scheduled an appointment for the following day, Saturday. Afterwards, we found ourselves looking at each other in silence. Without a word, I took Ruby's hand and led her to bed. We made love passionately, perhaps for the first time since she met Clark. Later, we lay together, and I fell asleep with my head on her chest. When I woke up around 5 o'clock, we made love again, tenderly this time. The counseling sessions proved beneficial. Ruby realized how Clark manipulated her insecurities and exploited the information she shared. She came to appreciate the life we had together and acknowledged that we didn't need outside influences to validate our relationship. The counseling continued for 3 months. For years later, we're happily married, and Ruby is expecting our first child. As for Mr. Clark, he had a nasty fall in our local shopping mall. It's unclear how it happened, but there were at least 5 husbands who had reasons not to like him present that day. We were all dressed alike, making it impossible to identify who was who at a nearby coffee shop. Despite police efforts to extract information, none of us revealed anything. I'm sure it wasn't one of us, I promise. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Write your opinion in the comments. Remember, you're writing a story too, and it's up to you whether it's a good one or not.